Welcome to another episode of The Nine, an era of transformation. I'm Ebony Brandon. In a world increasingly shaped by the challenges of climate change, few regions feel the impact as acutely as small island developing states like St. Kitts and Nevis. Rising sea levels, intensified storms, and shifting weather patterns threaten the very foundations of these islands, where communities and ecosystems are closely intertwined. But from the crisis emerges a vision of resilience that is championed by Senator Dr. Joyelle Clarke, the Federal Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action, and Constituency Empowerment.
As a leading member of Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew's progressive administration, Dr. Joyelle Clarke is leading a bold transformation, aiming to secure a sustainable future for the Federation. With a strategic focus on a transition to renewable energy, sustainable tourism, environmental conservation, and empowering communities, Dr. Clarke's initiatives are addressing both the immediate and long-term consequences of climate change. She shared with me the government's ambitious mission, reimagining St. Kitts and Nevis as a sustainable island state, resilient to climate threats and rich in opportunity. But it all begins with a welcome invitation in 2022 to join the cabinet of newly elected Prime Minister Drew, and the reality that she would at last have the opportunity to impact tens of thousands of lives and the course of the nation's future.
I welcome the conversation from Prime Minister Drew, then especially because he was offering service in an area that I am completely, fully trained in, that's environment and sustainability and climate. And it was still overwhelming to think that you're moving from being a teacher at a Keon High School, a geography teacher, to being in charge of a ministry that has everything to do with sustainability, climate, and empowerment. So I was excited for the opportunity, but still aware that it was a tremendous task to take on as a young female politician.
And let's talk about the fact that you are a young female politician, one of three who sit in the cabinet. Did that in and of itself mean anything to you?
Yeah, that was significant. I was so happy that Marsha Henderson won her seat and that she would be in the cabinet, but more importantly, that Prime Minister would welcome two other young female senators in his cabinet. And then, of course, you see by extension in the Parliament. As someone who has been promoting women's empowerment and making space for young people, I was so happy that the Labour Party administration recognized that we had to do more than talk about female in politics, giving women a seat at the highest level of decision making, but that we also had to trust them to lead ministries. And that's what he has done with myself and Senator Phillip and Minister Henderson.
So when you would have stepped into your office on that very first day, obviously you go through a process of acquainting yourself with your new staff, acclimating yourself in terms of what your personal agenda is, but then the government has a greater agenda and you have a role to play in supporting that, of creating the sustainable island state. With your background and training, and especially with climate change, today as we sit, we're facing an imminent threat of tropical storm, which is one of the fallouts of climate change. What were all of those challenges like coming for you on the day you stepped in?
So I think the first opportunity that we created, and I say we, and this came out of the conversation I was having with the Prime Minister then, was that the Ministry of Environment needed an entirely new department called the Climate Action Unit. And he agreed. And not just have it without being prominent in the name of the ministry. We agreed that it needs to be at the fore, so it's the Ministry of Environment and Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment. And having that conversation and recognizing then that you're not only coming in new, you're coming in and saying, I want an entirely new department and I want to just start from scratch with that. Even though a small unit did exist, it's now a department. You need to staff it, you need an agenda, you need to work on your policies. So that challenge of starting from zero was also a very good opportunity to create a department that didn't have to, didn't have the challenges of existing for 10 years and having a mandate, and now you have a new minister saying, I want this to be the new mandate. So that was and still is my greatest opportunity. We're working through climate action. We're developing all of the programs that are needed to ensure that St. Kitts has a strong voice in the regional and international agenda as it relates to climate resilience, and twinning that with the vision for St. Kitts and Nevis to become a sustainable island state. Now, that has been exciting and overwhelming, but in a great way. When we heard the throne speech by the Governor General, we heard about sustainability. And then Prime Minister articulated this in the first budget in 2022. And from there, the ministry was tasked with really outlining what this agenda, what this vision would look like, and what it meant for the key sectors of our government. And we're working on sustainability and bringing everyone on board. So it's not just the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Environment, it's all of government.
Our focus next turned to the strides made in sustainable development. Dr. Clarke's academic background in geography and geology brings a deep expertise to the government's transformative goal of a climate-resilient future. She reflected on the progress that has been achieved in charting a course forward for St. Kitts and Nevis as a sustainable island state, built on resilience and grounded in the vision of creating people-centered policies. This effort began with a swift assessment and restructuring of vital areas, including land distribution. The aim: to bring greater equity to citizens and residents accessing these essential services while enhancing efficiency across the government's operations.
So sustainable development was by far one of the trickiest part of the transition of this new government and for me as minister. For years, many persons thought of sustainable development, and perhaps in the latter years of the last administration, that was about land and PAP. So the first thing we did was reassign PAP, the People's Empowerment Program, to Poverty Assistance Program, rather, to its rightful home, which is in the Ministry of Social Development. And with that, people are better served because the assessment can be done properly, and you have the workers who understand what social intervention looks like. Secondly, we had to deal with the land issue, the fact that we had so many applications that weren't assigned to lot numbers. We had persons with double and triple allocation. We had persons who couldn't get access to land, and we redesigned the way the ministry distributes land through our program called Land Allocation and Normalization and Distribution Program. And with that program in sustainable development, we dealt with all the triple and double allocations. We had a land fair which allowed anybody and everybody to come to our ministry, bring your papers, talk about the issues, show us what you're experiencing. And then we realized that the challenge was people submitting 15 applications and never getting a response. Persons who received letters in the early part of 2022, just ahead of the elections, but the letters weren't valid. And then young persons who want to construct homes or access a mortgage facility at a bank, but couldn't because they didn't have land. So we dealt with that. We established a young professionals program, which allows bankable young professionals and professionals, even if you're not as young, to access land easily, sometimes in a matter of weeks. We've also had an ongoing Thursday afternoon engagement, and we've seen over 2,000 persons since September 2022. The team there, we established an interministerial land team. Outside of their regular work, they're working specifically on land issues. It means that the team, and I say that because I sat in some of the meetings and persons would come in and they would be shaking, and you're asking, why are you so nervous? And they're like, I've been waiting so long to get land, and I feel like, you're going to take it away. And so we made a public promise that we're not going to take away your land, but if we have to reassign you, we will. And I've experienced some of the most troubling situations. A young mother came in and she was crying, and she said, I have 3 children, I'm renting, I've just wanted to build for so long, and just expressing gratitude that the government and the minister and the PS and the team will just sit with you on a Thursday to hear your stories and help you. So that for me is major. Yes, it has been slow because it's thousands of applications that had problems. One of the last things that we did, which I think is a big like check for us at the ministry, is that we started a new land database because we have absolutely no files. We met no files coming in September. So persons will say, I applied 3 times, deleted, discarded, nothing. So we started from scratch. But now we're able to do it properly. To follow up on this, what we call land revolution, we're going to adjust the legislation, the Land Act, and of course it speaks establishing a land board, digitizing application, allowing the diaspora to apply online, pay online, and just track the progress of their land. So that's what we did with sustainable as it relates to land.
Clearly, access to land brings tangible opportunities, from home ownership and financial security for families to business ventures and community growth. But land is a finite resource. Dr. Clarke explained that the government is acutely aware of this and has developed a robust physical planning strategy to ensure sustainable and equitable access, mindful of the needs of both current and future generations.
So for land, and this is where the other parts of sustainable development become important, and that's the physical planning section, the development control planning board, lands and surveys, and urban development. These departments are critical to planning out what happens for St. Kitts and Nevis, but specifically for St. Kitts. So the update to our national physical development plan is suggesting that St. Kitts and Nevis has to now transition to vertical construction and vertical communities. We aren't accustomed to this. I mean, there are some examples that NHC did a couple of years ago. Now we're going to be saying to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, we can't spread out anymore. We have to construct vertically, and we have to adjust legislation if we need to, and we have to build smaller. 20-something years ago, 30-something years ago, CHA, NHC, they gave out land at probably 2,000, 3,000 square feet. And then we moved up to half acre and an acre because everybody wanted, you have a family, you want to live in comfort with space. Now we're recognizing that you have to, reduce the size of the lots. NHC standard 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, and people can build sizable homes on them. So that's part of the vision for ensuring that we don't give out all of our land now, and then 5 years from now, the next generation has nowhere to live.
Now, what about some of the plans for the homes that we have coming on stream? You spoke about this vertical development, but in terms of the existing housing situation, existing land situation, how are you looking at bringing this into sort of, I'm not sure if it would be an overlap with your urban renewal or your physical planning, or they cross paths somewhere, but what do you do with existing housing?
Right, so I'm happy you asked that question. So in terms of urban renewal and the work that the urban development unit is doing, we're recognizing that there's a need to do some regenerative work in Bastia. So we know we have some areas where we have more abandoned lots, abandoned properties. And these are not just like recently abandoned. These are persons who moved out of St. Kitts 60 years ago and left their property, and nobody owns it, nobody maintains it. So working closely with Parks and Beaches and Constituency Empowerment, we recognize through the data that we collected that there was a need to deal with the abandoned lots, not just because of security risk, but environmental risk. So we had the first reading of our Community Beautification and Safety Act, which will address these. And with urban development, working closely with the constituencies that have urban housing but no more space, Constituency 2, Constituency 1, we're going to be piloting programs for vertical construction there. And that's the only solution that we have. Then, of course, with urban regeneration across Newtown, we do know that a lot of our locals have moved out of Newtown, and we have an influx of persons from the Latin American community, but they are part of St. Kitts and Nevis. They are part of our society, and housing also has to respond to their needs. So all of this is taken into consideration in terms of how we look at a Bastille and Greater Bastille that facilitates housing needs for migrant population, that allows for safer communities when you deal with the abandoned lots and properties, and of course allows for Bastille to be a place where people can thrive, you can have livelihoods, it could be buzzy again.
And how do you do all of this and make it affordable? Because I'm thinking, we have to think about the fallout and effects of climate change, hurricanes, flooding, earthquakes, that sort of thing. But you also have to make sure that it's within access of ordinary people while being up to code and standard. How are you going to make sure that this is possible and attainable?
Right, and that's where the all of government approach comes in. So planning could suggest that how homes are constructed like this, we're smart, climate resilient, a certain grade of windows, a certain style of construction, a certain angle for the roof. But doing all of our cisterns, water catchment, water harvesting, so we can make all these recommendations. But it then requires the Ministry of Finance to determine how much concessions would you provide to homeowners or contractors to ensure that this happens. Then you have to connect with the MPs who have to speak to their residents and lobby. And it also requires the banks to be more thoughtful, which thankfully they are. Like you can see National Bank has come out with several options for mortgage access to be more flexible and responsive to the needs of the population, so that you can have sisters constructing together with their families. So it's rethinking what a family unit looks like and what they can afford in a home that's climate smart and resilient.
A significant challenge has always been striking the delicate balance between creating an environment in which entrepreneurs, particularly street vendors, can flourish while ensuring that our nation stays clean and our environment protected. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, many individuals bravely took charge of their futures after facing job losses and economic hardships due to lockdowns by starting small businesses to support their families. This surge in entrepreneurship, while beneficial, has presented new challenges, particularly in Bastille, where the increase in street vending has intensified issues like parking. In response, Minister Clarke has been working to develop innovative solutions that not only address these concerns, but which also show compassion and consider the diverse needs of vulnerable members of our community.
The balance between protecting persons and promoting livelihoods. And we don't want to be a government that says to people, you can't pursue your livelihood, or you must go into an office to survive. Like if you're skilled, you're creative, you're a chef, you sell, and you have to sell on the streets, you have to have an opportunity to do so, because sustainability for St. Kitts and Nevis is about every single person. With the vending in urban Bastille, there are designated vending sites, but we recognize that they weren't sufficient. And in some cases, persons want to be right where the flow of traffic, foot traffic is. So we've been working on our vending plan, which provides more opportunities for persons to vend in Bastille. But currently, once persons visit the Department of Physical Planning or Urban Development, they can be assigned specific vending sites. There are guidelines for how you operate, what licenses you need to get. And of course, what we wouldn't want while it happens is that persons set up shop on all the green spaces that we're creating. Having green spaces around communities, around residential areas, even in the corporate Bastia. It's part of creating a healthier city, but we don't create green spaces just for you to go and set up to sell. So we have long conversations, ongoing conversations with vendors who do this, and then we help them to reassign. We reassign them rather to appropriate spaces, but we recognize that there's a need for more vending spaces in Bastia, and we're looking at some of the abandoned properties, connecting with the lot owners to provide us the rental space for people to play.
And I know it's not necessarily specifically your department, but I can see where there would be the overlap between yourself and Minister Maynard, who is responsible for transportation, the parking situation in the city.
Right.
Because that's a situation where you do have to talk about the question of sustainability and what it looks like, its viability into the future. What are we doing about that as part of your domain?
Right. And so on our end, we have to recommend to persons, and we've heard this for years, you carpool, you park, and you walk. Now, it sounds tough when you tell people go walk at 12 o'clock. It is murderous outside to walk at 12 o'clock. So most of us want to park very close to the institution, establishment, wherever we're going, we want to be very close to it. But this speaks to the need for mindset and behavior shift. If the, let's say the Ministry of Transport decides to ban parking in Bastia altogether, then people will have to adjust. But that's punitive, so we don't want to go down that road. So now on the ministries, and we're saying let's have more spaces where people can park and walk into town. And then we'll probably have to promote that with, let's say, small electric buses that can give you free drops into town, or the elderly could park, or you have parking meters. But it really requires a transition and behavioral shift, not just for the persons who are driving in Bastia, but even for the government to take on the responsibility to say it's time to make a shift that the country can work with.
Nestled in the Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis may be the smallest independent nation in the Western Hemisphere, yet its voice resonates globally. From the United Nations General Assembly to this year's SIDS-4 conference in Antigua and Barbuda, the Federation stands alongside other small island developing states calling for greater climate justice. Minister Clarke shared how the government is advancing its ambitious efforts to shield our delicate environment. Through determined action and intentional cooperation, she explained that the Federation is carving a path toward resilience and sustainability.
I wouldn't want to say that we did all the work, but we did quite a bit of work getting St. Kitts and Nevis a solid place regionally and internationally as an advocate for climate justice, for reparatory climate finance, for accessing more funds as a high-income country. Now, when we say to let's say to constituents here that we're doing this work outside because home St. Kitts and Nevis cannot access grant aid. Our income is too high, so we don't access overseas development aid. It probably doesn't resonate until, let's say, God forbids, there is a devastating climate event and people realize that aid isn't going to flow as readily because of the high income status, or there are millions of dollars out there in grants that we could take and help people transition their small businesses, but another country can do it and access it, but we can't. That's a message that needs to really penetrate the general public. So we had to lobby. We had to go out there and say, as you rightly said, as one of the smallest independent nation in the Western Hemisphere, as a small island developing state, as a country whose contribution to CO2 levels is negligible, we're a coastal island nation. It means every single part of our borders, every part is vulnerable to sea level rise. We're also in the hurricane path. I mean, we're doing this interview now, as you said, and in a couple of hours, we're in tropical storm readiness mode. So we have to find a way for the international community to hear from us and from our experiences and recognize that we don't want you to give us handouts, but we want you to make it fair and just for us to survive, to access funding for a situation that we did not contribute to. You became wealthy on fossil fuels. Your economies tripled and quadrupled. We didn't. And we're not saying that we need to use fossil fuels to do the same, but even in transitioning to renewable energy, it has to be just. We have rural communities, we have elderly, young people, the LGBTQ plus community, pockets of vulnerability that needs to be addressed, and these people who must be protected, while you are also saying to us, stop using fossil fuels, change your power grid system and transition to renewables. It's just not fair. So you must provide the finance to do so.
Those are some of the things that where the conversation begins in terms of our engagement with the international community. But here, domestically, what have we begun to do to make the changes that we can to change our circumstances at home?
Mm-hmm. So, of course, the important thing here is messaging. If people don't understand why, they won't be with you. So we recognize that we had to make, environment and climate more relatable to the general public. We also had to simplify the message, not saying that the message isn't easily understood, but it is complex. It is many things coming together to say St. Kitts and Nevis has to become a sustainable island state. What does that mean? Why do we need to be sustainable and climate resilient when I can't buy bread in the morning for my children? Why do I need to care about the climate when my roof is leaking? How is it a bread and butter issue? And I've had many messages from my colleagues who said, why should I care, Dr. Clarke? I cannot pay my rent. My electricity bill is high. Why are you going on and on and on about climate when there are things more pressing? And I say to them, thank you for the challenge. And the reality is, how are you going to tell young people to care about your future when their present is so difficult? They're educated, but they don't have jobs. Or mothers who can't take care of their children, but you're saying to them, change your roof or change your windows. Or young persons who want to be entrepreneurs, but you are saying, when you do that, we want you to not look for a huge building, but have a smaller space, use a solar powered, have solar power as your source. People are not going to make the shift if their quality of life isn't appropriate, satisfying, and fair. And that's why I'm happy that when I sit in a cabinet, all 9 members understand climate messaging and make the changes in their relevant ministries so we could speak to sustainability. Social services must respond so people feel protected, and then they can say, hey, let's now think about protecting our home, the structure. Let's get insurance. Let's support the messaging around sustainability because the government is working with the people to take care of them. So until everything, but I'm happy that it is happening. I'm happy that it's happening. So we worked on the messaging, but then we also worked on providing more for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. So then they could have the time to say, let's work to become a sustainable island state.
Throughout this series, we've consistently underscored the significance of robust legislation, serving as the bedrock for every governmental pursuit. Thoughtfully crafted laws create a framework that not only supports the vision and policies of the administration, but also safeguards the rights of Kittitians and Nevisians. With the Drew administration focused on a transformative agenda to elevate the Federation over the next several decades, I questioned Senator Clarke about the pivotal role her ministry plays in lobbying for laws that will drive the Sustainable Island State agenda forward.
Legislative agenda is determined collectively at the cabinet level, of course, with strong recommendations from the ministry about what's priority. So recently we ratified the 5Cs 5Cs bill, which essentially said that the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center is legitimate and can accept funds on behalf of St. Kitts and Nevis and can roll out projects. Now that was prioritized by the AG and his ministry because we recognize that the Ministry of Water is in the project preparation phase for a $40 million trans water project. And that's the collaboration that's needed. Our ministry is the GCF Focal Point Green Climate Fund. We're working with 5Cs. Minister Maynard and Water needs the funding, and the Department of Legal Services provides us the avenue to get there. So the legislative agenda has been addressed, and we also recently had the first reading of NCMA, the National Conservation Environmental Management Act. And again, I said the Community Beautification and Safety Bill. So we could have the policies. Finance could say, let's give the concessions. But to make things legitimate and real, we needed the legislative support.
Although still in its early stages, the federal government through the Ministry of Environment is making significant strides towards safeguarding our environment. On 17th May 2024, the government marked a key step in its Sustainable Island State agenda with a ceremony in Nevis, celebrating the shipment of the first container of recycled plastic bottles from the Long Point landfill. This shipment was also significant as it exemplified the meaningful cooperation that now exists between the federal government and the Nevis Island administration in the national interest. The recycling initiative highlights the impact recycling can have, reducing landfill waste, conserving natural resources, and cutting down on pollution. Minister Clarke explained that the project is growing steadily and is paving the way toward a cleaner, greener future.
I love it. I mean, phase one, we saw the parents and the children and the PTAs from across the different schools, St. Kitts and Nevis, just collecting the garbage. Like some Saturdays I would be walking in St. Paul's and I think I saw two young boys with plastic bags and they're just going through and picking up, and I was like, yes, this is great, because the message is there that you need to do it. Why do you need to do it? You have to protect the animals, the marine animals. Why do we need to do it? Because it's our trash. We don't make plastic bags, plastic bottles, but we use them. And we have to deal with our garbage. So that response from the younger generation gave me so much hope, because it meant that they're going to carry that on. They're going to keep doing it. Phase two, we recently signed again with the Republic of China and Taiwan. So in partnership with the Department of Environment and Solid Waste Management Corporation, means the recycling becomes even more real, because we're moving to cardboard and tin cans and continue the plastic bottles and cans rather. But it means the population has absorbed this message of recycling so much that it is worth an investment in phase two. And then we recently had the launch of the Closing the Plastic Tap project with IUCN. And it suggests to me, with all these partners coming on board, that what we're doing here in St. Kitts and Nevis is resonating and it's worth the investment. Now, there are some persons who would say, why are you doing this? Like, we're so small, we don't contribute. But who takes care of our trash? Like, we generate it. We can't burn it. If you visit the landfill, you'll notice that all the cells are completely full. And there's no community that will accept a landfill in their community. So we have to continue the recycling and move towards, of course, shipment. You know, Nevis had our first bale shipped out. I mean, that was so exciting. And the partnership with St. Kitts and Nevis on this is so profound, and it's so indicative of how government should run. So I must pause and say thank you to Premier Brantley and, of course, to Minister Evelyn for starting the work in recycling and continuing it with us. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about phase two. I really look forward to a time when, you know, on Wednesdays, the smaller garbage truck is going to come and collect the blue bins, because it's plastic bottles and glass bottle recycling day. And then on Thursdays, you're going to have even a smaller truck coming for your compost and biodegradable material. Like, this is where we need to transition to. And it's not just big talk about, you know, climate risk. It's like practices in your home that makes us a sustainable island state.
Another significant step toward creating a sustainable and environmentally resilient future came in March 2024, when Minister Clarke announced the Drew administration's plan to ban single-use plastics. Structured in 3 phases, the ban will target the importation, sale, and distribution of single-use plastic and styrofoam products. Once fully implemented in 2025, St. Kitts and Nevis will join more than 100 nations, including at least 12 in the Caribbean, in taking action to reduce plastic waste and protect natural ecosystems.
Right, so we're on track. We did say that by December budget year, the Minister of Finance, which is the Prime Minister, will announce what the concessions are. And we took this time to really work it out so that the smallest livelihoods, the micro livelihoods, don't suffer. And I remember when I announced the ban, one of the first messages came from a friend of mine who has a bar in Sandy Point, and she said, "Joyelle, a burger in Sandy Point is $10. A burger in town is $35. And if I have to pay $3 for a biodegradable container, it means more to my bottom line than it does to an institution that gets an extra $15 to $20 for a burger. So what are we going to do?" And there was that commitment even before that message, but an appreciation from that message that we had to make sure we protect the micro livelihoods, the mom and pop shops, the corner shops, the chicken and chip shop, because if you don't make it easy for persons to transition, they're gonna just do the illegal stuff and hoard the plastics. But because the Department of Environment had a full almost 3 years of public consultation, data collection, planning and transitioning, connecting with other countries like Antigua and Barbuda, we understood that for St. Kitts and Nevis, the best approach was a very slow, phased transition. And now if you go to, I think I went to Valley Mart the other day, they have their bags. Before the bags, the reusable bags, the shopping bags were like $10, $20. People really didn't want to spend that much. They're $2.50. It is, I wouldn't say it's easy to spend $2.50 because everybody's budget is different, but it is a little bit less challenging because even the supermarkets are on board. They are ready for the transition. But the Ministry of Finance, along with Customs and Department of Environment, we're working it out so that the concessions that can be provided ensure that the smallest amongst us don't feel the squeeze.
And I was just about to ask you that, and you didn't mention it, but I'll ask you to expound it. Everybody always wants to be first in their rollout of things. St. Kitts and Nevis is certainly not the last, but you are behind countries like you mentioned, Antigua and Barbuda. You would have had an opportunity to learn from their mistakes. The slow rollout, you said, is one of the things that you realized. What are some of the other lessons you realized in your overall plan that you can draw from other countries and apply to St. Kitts and Nevis?
We realized also that we had to talk to people, and we had to talk to them over repeatedly, and not just the supermarket owners. We had to be mindful of even persons who Montserrat Plastics, for example. We couldn't say that we're banning plastics and Montserrat Plastics, who generates the black shopping bags here, didn't have time to transition, because if we're talking about, as you mentioned, climate justice, you have to be fair to people who exist. And this was a livelihood that provided employment. And if we shut them down by saying no more plastic bags in a month, it means 5-10 people would be out of a job. 5-10 families would be hungry. 5-10 plus children in school would struggle. So we worked with them so that they could transition their own manufacturing processes so that it's biodegradable plastic bags. And when they were ready, we said, okay, time to move to the next. The ongoing communication campaign, I realized, was important. And we do admit that sometimes government doesn't do the best job of marketing itself and promoting its policies and decisions. But we have been working very closely with our media partners to ensure the messaging is out there. And I think for me, that's key to ensuring our policies and decisions that we're taking on, that for some seem like international obligations and regional obligations, are supported, more palatable for the general public.
The strong international presence of St. Kitts and Nevis on climate justice and the quest for equitable solutions for small island developing states is in large part thanks to the long-standing relationships the nation has cultivated with regional and global allies. These partnerships, built over decades, continue to support the region's voice on the world stage. Senator Clarke explained how these essential alliances are nurtured to keep the momentum in this vital advocacy.
We're fully on board, whether it's through the OECS or even through CARICOM. And I'll give you an example. For example, OECS does have an existing single-use plastics project. St. Kitts and Nevis was not included because you can't be included in every single project. But what we did do was reach out to them and say, okay, so we have our program here and we want support. Give us the technical advice and the guidance. Connect us with the persons who have done it. Let's see what was right, what was wrong, and how we could partner. And even more recently, we recognized that there were some regional conventions that we didn't sign on to, and we have made the changes in terms of going to cabinet to get approval, and now partnering with the OECS in terms of making sure we ratify and we sign on, because regional cooperation around fisheries, around marine resources, and around biodiversity is critical. So we have been signing on to the relevant conventions. Swan Caribbean.
Although the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment may not oversee food security directly as the Ministry of Agriculture does, the synergy between both ministries is clear. Minister Clarke highlighted how her ministry's efforts to protect the marine resources around St. Kitts and Nevis plays a vital role in supporting agricultural sustainability. By safeguarding the marine ecosystems that surround our twin island nation, the ministry helps maintain the balance needed for sustainable food production, ensuring the health and resilience of local agriculture.
And I can speak to that on the side of marine resources, which is still part of the food structure for St. Kitts and Nevis, and we're working extremely closely with the Department of Marine Resources, for example, in terms of ocean coordination, in terms of high seas and protection, what passes through our oceans, what protects our biodiversity. And recently, the ministry participated in our Oceans 9, which was in Athens, Greece, and it was a joint delegation from DMR, Department of Marine Resources and Environment, and we recognize that if we're going to make the commitment to protect 30% of our terrestrial and oceanic resources, it means protecting food sources, protecting biodiversity, and ensuring that the fisher folk have access to sustainable fishing options for the next 30 to 50 years. So we understand in environment that, well, as you say, we might be the hub for environment and climate and sustainability, but we must connect it to the relevant ministries. So we work very closely with marine resources in particular.
One of the Ministry of Environment's roles, often overlooked, is its mandate to beautify St. Kitts and Nevis. Beyond the vitally important work of the Solid Waste Department in maintaining a litter-free landscape, the ministry actively focuses on enhancing green spaces and protected parks in sustainable ways. These efforts both preserve the natural beauty of our islands and elevates the quality of life for residents while creating memorable experiences for visitors. I asked Dr. Clarke about some of the initiatives launched by her ministry since the Drew administration took office in 2022. She led the discussion with the work being done in the Royal Bastia Valley National Park.
So the Royal Bastia Valley National Park, which is where the aquifer is, 300 plus acres, protected, and it's, for me, it's such a special space, not just because of the water resources, but because of the potential to provide St. Kitts and Nevis and Bastia in particular with a well thought out, respectfully designed green space national park that allows for food markets, that allows for farmers markets, for agriculture to have a space to plant tropical fruits, for orchids, etc. Orchards rather, not orchids, orchards, for cultural spaces, for well-being and wellness, which is a critical part of sustainability. So we also recognize that internationally, there is a commitment to protect 30% of our land, our terrestrial spaces. And Bastia Valley National Park is incorporated in this international commitment. But then what does it mean locally? It means instead of walking on the side of the road, you can walk through Bastia, the national park, wellness, mental health, safety. You can move, we can transition some of our farmers and vendors who are on the sides of the road selling to the proposed farmers market at that area. Meantime, we can also protect the aquifer, which has a lot of limits in terms of what can be constructed in the area. But we're using this as a project which demonstrates not just to St. Kitts and Nevis regionally, but to the world, that it's not every single square foot of land we're going to develop. We're going to protect, but we're going to protect it and develop it in such a way, restrict the development in such a way that our people and visitors can still enjoy the best of what is the Royal Bastia National Park.
Which speaks to the broader question of community beautification in general, not just in Bastia, but its environs in the countryside. What are your plans, or what have you been doing in that respect?
So thank you for that question, because this allows me to talk about the Parks and Beaches unit, which I lobbied for when we sat down in cabinet. I was like, I want parks and beaches, and I want solid waste. I want to deal with the garbage, and I want to deal with beautification. They must go hand in hand. And the Parks and Beaches unit has extended its mandate beyond just dealing with verges and cutting the grasses. The next extension has to be landscaping and beautification. Of course, you need the training, you need the skill, but it's more thoughtful landscaping. Like, we're not pushing planting flowers. I'm not saying anything is wrong with flowers. I'm saying even landscaping can be about edible landscaping. You see the Kittitian Hill model. It's ensuring that people could walk on the side of the road, pick a fruit, eat, and still feel like you're taking care of yourself while you're exercising. And it means that they can be in the communities, cleaning abandoned lots, or cleaning the lots for the elderly, or preparing green spaces. And that's where Parks and Beaches is headed. So yes, some people feel like, I just want to cut grass on the side of the road. But I really do appreciate the messages that come in, and like, we have a lot of plastic bottles just like down there at Newtown. It happens after a heavy rain event, and you send a message to the director, and the team rolls out and they clean the space. There are some groups that want to do camping. They want a space prepared for them. They head out and they do it in collaboration with the groups. So you're seeing like the community partnership along with Parks and Beaches, and a recognition of their services. Because I do admit that there are some persons who are like, they're just cutting grass. What's that? It's so critical. Like, you cut grass, you pick up plastic bottles, they take them to the landfill, you're maintaining the spaces, and now we're moving towards planting more fruit trees so people can eat.
Constituency empowerment is all about strengthening local communities by encouraging active involvement, self-sufficiency, and a strong voice on the decisions that impact their lives. Through support from the government, communities are provided with resources, education, and tools they need to shape policies, address their local challenges, and uplift their social and economic conditions. As the first director of the Department of Constituency Empowerment and now minister with responsibility for creating the plan and vision, Dr. Clarke explained her role at its inception through the foresight of former Prime Minister the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas, and its future under the hand of Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew.
I know when I got into the role of Director of Constituency Empowerment, then the mandate was very clear from the former Prime Minister. Connect what the government is doing to what people need. Support local governance, allow for stronger community groups and community structures, and work with community development, to work with all of the community agencies. That was a plan. Fast forward to 2022, and we recognize that the environmental mandate was as critical as the empowerment mandate, and there was a need to bridge them, hence constituency empowerment in the Ministry of Environment. And the team has been doing a tremendous job of collecting data, understanding what's happening in the communities, talking to persons, observing, and working closely with the community groups. And for me, this is the most critical part of government. We're basically saying that along with the services provided by community development, we now have constituency empowerment, which has the resources to collect data, map data, and also to redirect resources directly to communities and community groups. That's critical. It means if there is funding available for climate smart projects or water projects, it funnels through constituency empowerment directly to a community group on the ground resources. So constituency empowerment is the biggest and perhaps the most important part of the government's mandate in reflecting on the 2 years and in terms of looking to what's going to happen for the next 3 years. We are connecting the government to the people. We're empowering the community groups, and some of the projects that we've done. When we came in, we did the projects with the Super 6 football teams from last year. And now we're doing it, and I could say it now in this recording, that we're doing it with the teams, the St. Paul's Football Club, that's going to be the champion for 2024. I really hope we do. But this recording will show it. But these teams are strong teams in the communities. These are like 25 young men who are deeply connected to their communities, who are ready to roll out an environmental agenda with us through empowerment. Then we're taking it to the community festivals, reviving culture in the communities and providing support for them. You want to work with us, and they take on the mandate. Most recently, Constituency Empowerment worked with the Green Valley Festival, and it was, you can fet and you can party, but you could speak about water conservation, because it's right at the time when Keon was experiencing the water challenges. But now we have the pump, and we have the well, but we have the interventions through the water tanks. And it's all about making sure the climate resilience mandate connects with what matters most to people.
Now, you spoke about data collection, and I really would like to ask about this, because again, throughout all the interviews done so far, you're the fifth. You've seen this interconnectivity, and several times even during the course of the conversation that is there. This data collection in a government which has shown itself to be basing its decisions and policies on fact, on evidence, on scientific data collection. How do you work, for example, with this data with Ministry of Social Development? And because you said that your ministry's mandate, your portfolio as constituency environment is connecting government to the needs of your constituency, which they sought to do too in terms of assessing and evaluating the needs of the people in these communities and addressing those needs. So do you share your data with ministries like that in terms of your social support programs like LIFT? Do they benefit from the work you do?
Yes, they do. So recently we completed a series of 8 meetings with the other senators and ministers in terms of what's happening in your ministry based on the data we've collected. And we're working very closely with the GIS department in terms of mapping what we are seeing. So our empowerment officers were able to say to the Minister of Energy, people are saying they have a problem with servicing their electricity bills. And let's see who they are, what the profile is of this person, and how it can help you with the implementation of the smart meters or prepaid meters. When we sit with you as a MP and a constituency representative, because our ministers have 2 roles, we say to them that in this constituency, the main problem is, let's say, potholes or water or disposal of garbage, and intervention is needed. So they get first-hand information. We share with their directors and the PSs of the relevant ministries. We have a program right now with Human Settlement and NHC through the data that was collected and through the work of constituency empowerment, which proved to us that social housing and intervention in social housing was critical. Like the next housing revolution that we're doing now, 2,400 homes needed another layer. And this was social intervention. And it's not a political thing. It's the data is showing that regardless of who you support, if you're in this age range and you have this number of children, or you live in this particular community, you need social intervention, or your salary is this, you need social intervention with housing. And it helped us to define, along with the Ministry of Finance, how we could do a home intervention program, not construct a home, but provide relief. Now, we're learning from our partners in Antigua and Barbuda that you can climate-ready homes, hurricane-proof homes. And that's the next part of the intervention that we're working towards. How do we get homes ready for the hurricane season? And I don't want to be like, I don't want to talk about how deplorable some situations are, but there are things that will break your heart when you see the elderly persons shoving water out of their homes like it was a flood from a rain event. And you can't, as a politician, just say, okay, well, you have to respond. And the work from constituency empowerment is so critical, so important, that without their data, without their assessment, without them going into the communities, sitting in the meetings, in the community meetings, talking to community leaders, how would we know? People, and you only know of people who post. How would we know that this elderly person who is on social welfare, who has some social security benefits, sleeps next to a bucket catching water every night? Like, those things aren't acceptable in a high income country, in a country that's 41 years. It's not. So I am very, very pleased. And I would say that perhaps if I was left with one thing to do as a minister, it would be constituency empowerment and how we could get information and connect with people so that we could help them.
It is evident that Minister Clarke has been anything but complacent. Her dedication to the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis has sown the seeds of change that promise a bountiful harvest for years to come. With this in mind, I felt compelled to ask,
what are perhaps maybe 2 or 3 of the things that you're most proud?
I think I'm most proud of the revitalization of constituency empowerment, because when we met that, it wasn't serving the community. And we've restructured it. We have institutionalized it. It is a real department. They are doing tremendous work. That's number one in terms of hearing from people. Number 2 is the land revolution. I did not understand the severity of the land challenge that we had for St. Kitts. And I did not understand. I mean, I knew all along that land was a passionate thing for people of St. Kitts. I mean, you go all the way back to the 70s with Papa Bradshaw. We know what he did for us in making land, nationalizing land. But I couldn't fathom that in 7 years, people would reverse such a brilliant decision by disenfranchising us basically from land and tying it up in corrupt processes. So for me, land revolution and the land program that's led by the Ministry of Sustainable Development is critical, because it speaks to fixing an issue that is most important to Kittitians, and that's having a piece of the rock. And finally, our environmental program with the Sustainable Island State, and the fact that the ministry has been afforded this tremendous opportunity to plan it, to map it out, to say what it means, and to connect all the ministries. I mean, the Prime Minister giving me the responsibility to do that, I feel like a queen, because he's saying that he trusts our leadership, my leadership as a young female politician, as a senator, to push a national agenda, and that the entire ministry is behind it means so much. We're basically mapping out the vision for St. Kitts and Nevis. So 30 years from now, the students who are in preschool could say, that administration did this. They understood that we needed to protect our oceans, protect the aquifer, protect our water resources, feed ourselves, have a tourism product that's connected to heart and country and home, have one grid, connect with Nevis, do geothermal, have climate smart housing. I mean, it's visionary, and we get to lead it.
Time waits for no man, and with nearly 2.5 years of Dr. Terence Drew's government behind us, we now turn our gaze toward the future. Having established the groundwork for a climate-resilient, sustainable island state, I posed the question, what does the future hold for Dr. Clarke and her ministries?
The next half of the year definitely want to finalize our legislative agenda. We're also going to work a little bit more aggressively on some of the other plastic bans that are needed, not just to meet the regional and international agenda, but to clean up St. Kitts and Nevis. And then, of course, we're looking towards the Solid Waste Management Corporation in terms of the transition of the landfill that is most needed, whether it's waste to energy or waste management. On the climate resilience agenda, by then the sustainable island state would be completely mapped out. We're all going to be saying it needs $5 million to do this, and we're working on this project and so forth. And if I had to, within the next 3 years, people would be able to apply for land online, pay for land online, plug in their application number, and see the progress of the processing of their land application, from submission to payment to pricing letter to crown grant to registry. Next 2 years.
As one of the appointed senators in Dr. Drew's cabinet, Dr. Clarke shared her aspiration to return in a new administration to continue serving the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. She emphasized, however, that regardless of what the future holds for her professionally, there are several accomplishments she will always take pride in delivering on behalf of her fellow citizens.
I hope that I'm remembered as that young climate environmental advocate who said we have to keep St. Kitts clean, we have to protect the most vulnerable, we have to ensure that whether you live country or town, you live in your best life ever because you're in a safe community. It's clean, the water is clean, you could turn on your lights, you don't have to worry about pollution and garbage. We're recycling. Young mothers have homes. Young men have homes. People have livable jobs. Now, how am I going to achieve all of that? I can't. That's the entire government doing what it needs to do. But for our ministry, it means that the 5 years that I was here, people no longer have to have heart palpitations when they think about land. Persons understand the importance of climate resilience. NHC has institutionalized its climate smart home agenda. So every house has to be built like that because they work with us. That constituency empowerment has amassed like a database that you could pinpoint any person and see where they were to where they are now because our interventions work. And the sustainable island state agenda, the 7 pillars, the budget, what it means, what it does, rolls off the tongue of every 5-year-old in a preschool. That's it for us and for me.
That brings us to the end of another edition of The Nine, an era of transformation, featuring the Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, Dr. Joyelle Clarke. Thank you for joining me, Ebony Brandon, as we continue to explore how the visionary leadership of the 8 men and women led by Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew is paving the way toward a brighter, more resilient future for all Kittitians and Innovisions.